welcome. This is Studio W, the Buzz, your global radio network. You know, we circle this thing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with some of the finest programs you can find anywhere around the world. Wednesday is a special day because that's when we will bring on your tax expert, and that's Mr. Everett James. Ev, how are you, sir? Okay, I'm getting no sound out of Ev. Okay. Okay, let's see.
Let's
Here we
see.
go.
Let's see. If you're not getting a sound from me.
I am now. I
Okay.
am. All right, sir. Okay, so how are you?
I'm doing well, Mr. Brown. How about you?
Doing great, doing great. Okay, I'm sure you might cover some of this today. And is this week 3 of the government shutdown or the
This
end of
is you know something? This is the day 15
day
of the
15?
government shutdown. It is also the deadline for filing extensions for the 2024 tax year.
Okay, all right. So I know there's a lot to unpack there, but I do have a quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
This big, beautiful, ugly bill. I think, boy, I know a lot of people have their opinions about that.
Sure.
But the Republicans, they have the Senate, they have the House, they even have the executive office, which is the president. And there shouldn't be a need for a shutdown.
Shouldn't be.
Perhaps you maybe address that today. So anyway, I'm going to step aside and listen to your broadcast.
And thank you so much, Mr. Brown. And thank you for the opportunity to present both sides of the argument.
Okay.
So what we will do, of course, is to highlight some of the major issues, with funding the government. Unfortunately, one side is demanding that some major changes be made in the subsidies for medical care, particularly for the Affordable Care Act coverage. And they're making that as a demand that has to be met before they will negotiate their way out of this government shutdown. Republicans, on the other hand, want a clean bill and want the government to be open before those funding issues are resolved. In any case, what we will do with this morning's program, we'll take a look at, first off, this time, which is a little different than in the past. We're going to look at some of the tax filing updates because, after all, we're really only a few months away from having to file for that 2025 tax year. How exciting! And I want to give the listening audience a preview of what some of the special features are. That way they can start preparing for this momentous event of filing for the 2025 tax year. So I'm gonna move that up front, and then we'll look at the government shutdown update. It basically has not changed, this being day 15 of the shutdown, and then we'll take a look at the some of the impacts of the one big beautiful bill. I always say big beautiful bill rather than ugly, but in any case, we'll resolve that at another venue. But then we'll take a look at some of the risk and some of the state responses to the cuts in the Medicaid funding. If we have time. This programmer is Everett James. I come on every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. on the West Coast and 1 p.m. on the East Coast. And folks, we invite your participation. Please call in with your questions. Or email them in if that suits you. Everett James is the programmer. My phone number is 951-522-9877. 951-522-9877. And to contact this station by email, evjtax1 at gmail.com. To repeat, evjtax1 at gmail.com. Okay, folks, we will certainly try our best to repeat that contact information before the close of this morning's program. So for those who do contact us with your comments, there will be a bonus for your action, and please take part. Okay, to begin with, some of the tax filing updates for you folks, and I would urge you to grab a pen and pencil so you can make notes, because it's always best, particularly for folks who are in their later years and may have some ongoing memory problems. The one big beautiful bill has provided so many new tax options, and I want to just highlight some of the breaks for businesses. Since that is we typically focus mostly on personal tax returns, but let's do a brief update on just a few of some of the special breaks businesses can use. The business lobbying groups have pushed Congress hard for certain expiring and expired business tax breaks. Okay, so what are they? Well, there's 5 key tax breaks, particularly for businesses. Folks, what we'll do is just highlight those because there's so much else, to get to. Prior to, the first one is the first year bonus depreciation. Prior to 2023, businesses could deduct the full cost of qualifying assets with lives of 20 years or less. It was 80% in 2023, 60% in just last year, 2024. And now for this year, it's just 40%. Now, the one big beautiful bill fully revived that break to 100% for business assets first put in use after January 1st of 2025. And the break is permanent. This will help lots of firms. For example, if you buy a heavy SUV solely for business use and you place the vehicle in service after January 19th, you can again deduct the full cost. Second, the firms can fully deduct the cost of manufacturing production facilities. The third major break is Section 179 expensing, and that's the ongoing expensing. That has been increased. Number 4, there's full expensing of domestic research and development costs, and that's permanently restored. That's a whole nother subject. That's a whole nother hour of information, which we will go into with your special request. And then 5, the popular 20% qualified business income deduction, abbreviated QBI. That's now made permanent, and that covers more and more of you folks. Listen, how many of you out there are self-employed? How many of you are independent contractors? How many of you are farmers? Some landlords. There are many landlords in the listening audience, and owners of pass-through entities, such as partnerships, LLCs, and S corporations. You can claim a 20% qualified business write-off on line 13 of the Form 1040. So those are some of the improvements. Now, for folks who gamble, and how many in the listening audience gamble, remember these rules. All gambling winnings are taxable. For 2025, casinos and other organizations, gambling organizations, they will file what they call a Form W2G, a 2G. It's really similar to a W-2, only just add the capital G to it. W-2G for 2025, for the current tax year, casinos will file that for winnings of $1,200 or more in bingo or slots. So the threshold there for filing or required filing is $1,200 for bingos or slots, and if it's Keno, it's $1,500. That's the threshold. And then if it's poker tournaments, wow, that's anything over $5,000 meets that threshold for reporting. Most people report their gambling winnings on Schedule 1 of the 1040. The gambling losses are deductible, subject to two important conditions. Now, first, folks, only the taxpayers who claim itemized deductions on Schedule A of the 1040. So you have to itemize in order to deduct, your gambling losses. If you take the standard deduction, you're out of luck. The second, for 2025 and then earlier years, your losses are deductible, keep in mind, only to the extent of winnings that you report on Schedule 1. So the key here is that you're not going to deduct anything that is above what you win. So you really can only deduct up to the amount of the winning. So beginning with the 2026 federal tax return, you'll be reporting that on Schedule 1. But beginning with the 2026 federal income tax form that you would file in 2027, you'll only be able to deduct 90% of your gambling losses to offset your winnings. So that's, but you're still good for the 100% figure of your losses for 2025. Okay, for those of you who are looking at not only the amount of taxes that you may be liable for, but also looking at just how all of this is going to play out on paper. The service is the IRS service is phasing out, first, folks, paying your tax refunds by paper checks. You've heard about the computerization of this activity. Well, they are phasing out paying any of the refunds by paper check. Now, IRS originally said that it would implement this rule for individuals beginning after September 30th of this year, but the IRS National Taxpayer Advocate says the refunds relating to pre-2025 tax returns will not be affected. So 2024 will not be affected by this rule. Nonetheless, IRS is encouraging filers with 2024 returns on extension to include the direct deposit information. So have that bank information, routing number, bank account number, have that handy for all of your business relating to your tax liabilities and relating to paying whatever is liable you're liable for. Just get it set in your mind that all payments and refunds are going to be strictly done, through a computer transmission. So with respect to the 2025 tax filing year, taxpayers who do not provide the bank account details or request an exemption, or ask for an exemption, they're going to be facing delays in their refunds. The agency will send a letter out to these filers requesting the bank account number and giving directions on how to request an exemption from the rules. Now, folks who receive the letter but do not comply will unfortunately find that their refunds are going to be delayed. Taxpayers who receive the letter, as they say, and do not comply, they'll see their refunds, and they can be delayed up to 6 weeks or more. Keep in mind that the Social Security Administration is offering the option of a prepaid debit card to Social Security beneficiaries who do not otherwise have a bank account. Just some additional tax tips. If you are in the unenviable position of having your real property tax, the home property tax, if you fail to pay and it winds up leading to your home being foreclosed upon, whew, how much must the county pay you? Well, the Supreme Court will be making those kind of decisions. As an example, a homeowner's failure to pay real estate property tax led to a Michigan county foreclosing on the home and selling it at public auction. Well, the homeowner owed $2,200 in unpaid property tax. The fair market value of the home on the foreclosure date was about $194,000, and the property was actually sold at public auction for $76,000. Wow, don't miss those those property tax payments. Earlier this year, an appeals court agreed with the county that the homeowner was entitled to $73,000 of surplus proceeds from the sale, plus accrued interest. The homeowner, however, claims that the amount owed on the property owner in this situation should be determined based on the fair market value of the foreclosed property and not what the county actually just received from the auction. Well, the High Court took the case to decide whether the homeowner's constitutional rights are violated under the Fifth and Eighth Amendment by the county's foreclosure action. So that's still in process. Okay, folks, a major tax tip: eligible self-employed individuals can deduct up to $25,000 of their work tips. In September, last September, we discussed I discussed a new deduction for qualified tips. Now we've received questions as to whether self-employed individuals who file Schedule C with their 2025 Form 1040 next year are eligible for this OBBB, the one big beautiful bill tax write-off. The answer is yes, but they must include tips received in their gross income. The write-offs, folks, on your tips, keep this in mind, it cannot exceed the net income from the business. So the profit, you can't write off tips that are more than your profit, from the business. More specifically, the proposed regulations say that for non-employees, self-employed, qualified tips are deductible, and keep this in mind, they're only deductible up to the extent that the gross income, exceeds, the business deductions. IRS does have some guidance, and we have two examples to illustrate this limitation. Now, in the first example for getting the computing properly, the tax on the on your tips, a self-employed manicurist does people's fingers and nails. She owns a nail salon and it has $100,000 of gross income from her business. Well, $70,000 of fees and $30,000 of qualified tips. So that's how you get the gross income of $100,000. Now, the lady's Schedule C deductions were $40,000. Now, provided she meets all the other rules for the qualified tips break, she can deduct up to $25,000, on her tax return. And that would be on the IRS Schedule 1A. Now, the second example, and so all you would have to do, is basically take the gross income, and subtract out the expenses. But the second example, she could in the second example, she had this particular person has 75,000 of gross income from her business, $55,000 in fees, and 20,000 of qualified tips, and then $60,000 of Schedule C deductions. Well, provided the manicure meets all the other rules for the qualified tips tax break, she can deduct this time only $15,000. Where'd you get that figure? Well, the $15, you have to take the $75,000, to begin with, and subtract out $60,000. That's how you come up with the $15,000 that you could deduct on the tax return. But you say, yeah, we're only limited to $15,000. So if there are enough folks who get tips from their employment, and please let us know. Call in, and this reporter will go into more detail on the computation of the amount of the tips that they can actually deduct and not have to pay any tax on. Another thing that relating to digital assets, if you sold or will sell any digital currency through a brokerage account this year, well, look for the brokerage firm to send you a Form 1099-DA by February 17th of next year. New legislation requires brokers to report sales price, tax basis, and other information on digital asset trade. So that's coming into the fold. That's more and more of an issue. Reporting of the sales tax proceeds starts with the 2025 forms, numbered 1099-DA to be sent out in 2026. The reporting of tax basis and character of gain kicks in next year. This does not apply to decentralized crypto exchanges, also known as DeFi exchanges. Folks, the Congress passed the one big beautiful bill, and I would, if you're sitting on my side of the aisle, that's how you will identify it, not as an ugly bill. But Congress passed the bill. IRS now has to implement the bill. Well, this is a Herculean task. It includes revising forms, revising instructions, revising publications, reprogramming computer systems to account for all of the changes in the OBBB. Lots of changes have a lot of complex rules that require IRS guidance to interpret all of those law changes. The IRS's annual priority guidance plan has 40 projects related to just the OBBB. Among some of the provisions affecting the taxpaying public, and particularly the multinationals, new deductions were up to $12,500 of overtime pay, and that's for single individuals, and $25,000 for joint returns. So the one big beautiful bill did provide a deduction for overtime pay. The new deductions are for overtime pay. They're up to $12,000. They affect up to $12,500 of overtime pay on joint returns, and up to $10,000 of interest paid on loans, to buy a new vehicle. That was not publicized a great deal, but it is going back to a For those of you who are in the older generation and remember Schedule A, at that years ago, we could deduct the interest paid on loans to buy a new vehicle, not lease the vehicle, folks, but buy a new vehicle. There's a new temporary 100% depreciation allowance for qualified production property, and the tax credit for individuals who donate to qualified scholarship organizations. So there's much, much more. Now, will the IRS workforce reductions negatively impact the 2026 filing season? You bet, you bet they will. A lot of Treasury inspectors are worried. As of May 2025, about a few months ago, IRS lost between 17% and 19% of its staff in key filing season programs that are responsible for manning the phone, resolving tax return errors, processing tax returns, stopping tax-related fraud, and providing, of course, your in-person assistance. Now, these job figures have risen even higher since mid-year, increasing inventories that were not worked during 2025 that didn't work out will carry over into the 2026 filing season and could delay IRS processing of the 2025 tax returns. That's a warning from the Treasury. They also expect an increase in fraudulent returns because there are fewer workers to catch and prevent a fraud before a refund is paid. The loss of the IT workers threatens IRS's ability to seamlessly implement the tax changes in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And taxpayer correspondence will continue to go unanswered. That's going to be a huge number of taxpayers. And many of them, have become accustomed to getting a response. Well, because of the bill, let's face it, there's going to be a huge lapse in responses from IRS, both on for the telephone and through internet, and certainly not through paper inquiries. So, how will the government shutdown that we're now experiencing affect IRS, taxpayers, and tax pros? Well, it depends, of course, on how long the closure lasts. Well, IRS remained fully open, during the first 5 days of the shutdown. Now, unfortunately, folks, about half of all of its staff are furloughed. Now, this furlough group includes employees who work in enforcement and most collection activities, those who work in taxpayer communications or just answering phones, employees who are engaged in processing the returns of are key to executing the tax changes, but they're still working. Tax professional groups are warning about what happened during the 2019 shutdown. And you will recall, during those days, IRS was shuttered over 30 days. That, of course, resulted in long phone tax waiting times and a huge mail backlog. And of course, everybody's worried about a delayed start to the 2026, tax filing year. Okay, we're on day 15 of the government shutdown. Democrats and Republicans, they fully appear locked in their positions as the government shutdown, crosses the 2-week mark. They've had a number of bills that have fell short of the 60 votes needed for, and that was after the 5 votes that took place. Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Thune, I believe he's from South Carolina, he reported that the chamber will keep voting on the same competing bills over and over again until they get it right. There is a memo from the White House's Office of Management, OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, and that's been circulating that suggests that 750,000 furloughed workers are not guaranteed back pay. Let me repeat that again. That memo suggested that 750,000 furloughed workers are not guaranteed back pay. When asked about furloughed workers getting back pay, President Trump replied, "Well, I would say it depends on who we're talking about." California Hollywood Burbank Airport operated without air traffic controllers for several hours on Monday night, hours after the union representing the air traffic controllers, had begun to call in sick since the shutdown began. And this also, you will recall, happened during the Reagan years. And as you would recall, that was resolved by the firing by Reagan of all the traffic controllers. Well, so there's going to be huge impacts. They are continuing to meet and caucus, hoping that they can reach that 60 vote margin. The last week, Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina, and the Senator Kevin Cramer, both Republicans, they're willing to negotiate in good faith with Democrats on extending a set of health care tax credits. Okay, Congress needs to pass a clean bill, according to the Republicans, to fund that government first before they can negotiate on that issue. The major difficulty, the major disagreement is in funding Medicaid, and it involves a huge population of folks who use the ACA, the Affordable Care Act bill that was passed under the Obama administration, and because the Obamacare Act extended extended special credits, that helped to reduce the premiums for folks, particularly in the lower income group, but that helped them to pay those premiums every month. So the part of the deal back during the Obama administration, part of the arrangement, and that was put into law, is that those subsidies, and they're very, very ample, extensive subsidies, large subsidies. They were those very, very generous subsidies by law were set to expire as of the end of this year, 2025. Unfortunately, one side of the aisle is demanding that the budget negotiations hinge on reinstating those huge subsidies, but they had legislated that they would terminate as of the end of this year. Well, that's not what the one side of the aisle is demanding. They're demanding in order to agree on a budget, a fiscal budget. They're making their participation possible only if the expiring subsidies are extended and are renewed. That was not part of the original agreement. So the leader of the one party, Schumer, says the Republicans are feeling the heat. Well, they are feeling the heat, but Republicans have been forced to talk about how to address the crucial issue here is really the overall health care costs, which have exploded. And that's really what is the major issue. And of course, the one side of the aisle is demanding a extension and renewal of those subsidies, which was not agreed upon originally. The regarding the air traffic controllers, Senator Schumer has reported that the controllers resent, quote, how Trump is trying to use them. As the shutdown does hamper an already stretched thin Federal Aviation Administration. And this is not something that really many of us who travel want to hear about. Wow. One of the things that Trump has even has mentioned is to use the revenue from the tariffs to help fund some of these special programs, particularly the special supplemental nutrition program for women, which provides nutrition assistance to millions of low-income women and children. White House had warned that the WIC funding is running dangerously low because Congress has not voted in the fiscal program for 2026. Thankfully, President Trump and the White House, they have identified some creative solutions to transfer resources from tariff revenues to this critical program. So it's unclear right now what steps the administration will need to take to transfer the funding. The Democrats, unfortunately, have remained clear on their position to extend health insurance tax credits and reopen the government, adding that they claim they're not pushing to give health insurance to undocumented immigrants, despite what has been claimed by the other side of the aisle. Premiums, medical premiums really are expected to more than double next year if those expiring tax credits are not renewed. Republicans have said they will not negotiate on that issue until Democrats vote for their bill to reopen the government. So that is the crucial point. Recently the Federation Aviation Administration had a busy travel weekend recently. Nearly 50,000 flights forecast for that have been forecast for Thursday, October 9th, and nearly 52,000 flights forecast for just this past Friday, October 10th. That was a dangerous time because so many people were traveling, and I'm sure that a lot of people may have had some delays in trying to get to their families' places, by Monday, with indigenous people's holiday, Columbus Day. So it's as of at least this year, the One Big Beautiful Bill, it is projected to cause a lot of reductions in both Medicaid and Medicare spending. It delays or repeals certain reforms and expands some benefits under the separate Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. That was passed, of course, during the Biden's administration. But because of the OBBB, that's led to major changes in coverage of Medicaid, eligibility for Medicaid, and costs for the beneficiaries. So the major changes that the OBBB did bring about was the changes in coverage of Medicaid, eligibility for Medicaid, and then the costs for the beneficiaries. Now, some states have SDPs. What are SDPs? State directed payments. SDP, folks, when you see that. Some states have state directed payments that actually make payment for Medicaid services between 200 and 300% higher than the state's published coverage. The OBBB further limits which categories of lawfully present immigrants can receive Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Now, even though some folks on one side of the aisle claim that that there's been no violation of federal law prohibiting extension of Medicaid to illegal immigrants. In actuality, there are 40 states and Washington, D.C. that have adopted the Medicaid expansion provisions. And the states are adopting these Medicare expansions, covering all manner of folks who have not come to the United States illegally. There's so the one big beautiful bill, among other things, it states and sets up rules stating that Medicaid is a joint federal and state program, helps cover medical costs for some people with limited income and resources. The federal government does have general rules that all state Medicaid programs must follow. And one of those rules is that it cannot be used to fund medical care for folks who are not legally in the United States. But of course, the federal government does have their general rules. And then, of course, all of the Medicaid programs are run by the state. They have their own the programs have different names in different states. In California, it's called Medicaid is called Medi-Cal. In Kansas, it's called CanCare, K-A-N-C-A-R-E. So the new bill, as I mentioned, formerly named the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was signed into law on July 4th of this year. It does include cuts to Medicaid of almost $1 trillion over the next 10 years. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimates that means that about 11.8 million Americans could lose their health insurance. So anyways, there's been some debate about the estimate, but the Congressional Budget Office does have a strong reputation for high quality and nonpartisan analysis. And having said this type of estimate requires a lot of assumptions. So we would not be surprised if the actual effect on Medicaid, could be, even larger. As an example, the estimates by the Congressional Budget Office, that requires assumptions about how much states could raise their own spending to backfill lost federal funds. So that's happened a lot in many of the states. But regardless of the precise fits, it is undoubtedly, looking at this in a long-range perspective, it really could shrink the, regardless of, what our estimates are, it is going down as the most regressive cut to federal health benefits that has ever been enacted in the United States. Now, are there any changes going on with the Affordable Care Act? Sometimes, which is often called Obamacare. Well, are there any changes with that legislation that will affect the number of Americans who have health insurance? and it does affect those who not only folks who are here illegally. Unfortunately, yes, to fund larger tax cuts, the bill avoided extending current subsidies that will make the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, marketplace insurance plans affordable. Those subsidies were agreed upon to expire at the end of 2025. And of course, that's led to premiums that double for a lot of folks, which the Congressional Budget Office estimates will cause more than 4 million more people to become uninsured. Now, along with Medicaid cuts, there are other provisions making it harder for people to enroll in the Affordable Care Act plan, the Obamacare Act, even when eligible. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that the total number of uninsured will rise by 17 million people by 2034. Of course, those cuts are going to indirectly harm the rest of the population by raising the financial pressure on health facilities. A lot more people uninsured implies more unpaid medical bills. That leads to healthcare price increases for everyone. Ultimately, healthcare facilities in low-income areas will have to cut back on services. And based on past experience, we can confidently predict that some safety net clinics and hospitals are going to be forced to close, particularly those in rural areas. Which populations are most at risk to lose insurance? Well, the biggest adverse impacts will be on those who gained insurance from the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. And that was, the biggest group in that would be affected were low-income adults ages 18 to 64 without young children. That is the group that will have this new work requirement. You have to spend at least 80 hours per month in verified work-related activities. States that have previously passed such work requirements have seen a lot of folks lose insurance, though often because the bureaucracy has made it so difficult to prove that they are actually complying with the law. Another population at high risk, of course, are immigrants who have been placed on humanitarian visas. Now, under the OBB, those individuals who've been on humanitarian visas will now be barred from Medicare. Now, a lot of folks are concerned that increased state budgetary pressure from other OBBB provisions could cause states such as California to decide to rescind state-funded healthcare assistance for undocumented immigrants. Undocumented immigrants are not provided with standard Medicaid benefits through federal funding. Some adults over age 65 are also predicted to lose dual Medicaid coverage that helps them pay for Medicare cost sharing. So there's an arrangement that you could use the Medicaid coverage. For some folks, if they have that coverage, that helps them to pay for some of the cost sharing in the Medicare program. Now, how will these cuts affect California specifically? Well, we've seen a range of estimates on the predicted number of California residents who will lose insurance after the ACA, Affordable Care Act. After that was implemented in 2013, the uninsurance rate in California dropped from 17% to the current 6%. That's a huge drop. But analysts now project that it could go back to well over 10% folks who are not covered by insurance. And that's in addition to the predicted effects of the millions of Californians who will lose the benefits from food stamps due to other provisions of the OBBB Act. Now, what about rural areas? Well, because of higher poverty, Medicaid coverage rates really are higher in rural areas. So the OBBB cuts are predicted to disproportionately harm rural areas. Last-minute politicking by Republican senators with large rural populations resulted in a new rural fund intended to offset impacts on the rural healthcare providers. But really, the fund is really far too small relative to the predicted adverse effects. So prominent rural healthcare experts are really predicting some closures of some rural hospitals and closures of clinics as a result. Although the primary focus was not on older adult healthcare, various provisions will have adverse effects. One is that there will be a loss of dual Medicaid coverage for some Medicare enrollees, and that will make it harder for them to financially access long-term care. So that's the OBBB Act has huge impacts not only on Medicaid and on the coverage of folks under the Obamacare Affordable Care Act, but it's certainly going to make it have a huge effect on them to access long-term care, which is skyrocketing already. So the is another effect that nursing home experts are concerned about is that a provision in the new OBB Act that bars enforcement of a Biden-era rule mandated staffing levels in long-term care facilities. So one thing that Biden did do that was a great positive impact. Some of his accomplishments have been in mandated minimum staffing levels in long-term care facilities and other healthcare facilities. So the result is that the BBBA, the beautiful bill, One Big Beautiful Act, is preventing some nursing home quality improvements. More indirectly, state budgetary pressures have often led to cuts in state-funded home and community-based services for older adult caregiving, and that's one of the that area or that group of in the population is skyrocketing, particularly for those folks who are over the age of 85. They call them the super elderly. The biggest wild card is that the magnitude of the tax cuts in the bill will raise the national debt by about $3 trillion. I can hardly pronounce it. About $3 trillion over the next few years. So not all of these adverse effects are inevitable. Again, not all of these effects, these are projected, but they're not all just set in stone. Many of the biggest insurance cuts will not take effect for another several years. So there is some time for policy reversals under a future Congress and administration. The states can also choose to respond in various ways. The unprecedented Medicaid cut was really accompanied by even bigger federal tax cuts for the wealthy and corporations. So it's likely that whatever comes out of the negotiations, that there's going to be probably a large slice or portion of the population that will no longer be eligible for some of the subsidies. And so there's going to be a large group of the folks who have higher than average earnings and income, and corporations where they just simply will not have access to the subsidy, any subsidies. States could implement corresponding state level tax increases in order to partially backfill, they call it backfill, federal safety net cuts. So there's going to be a lot of cuts in Medicaids on the state level, and those cuts generate the need to, as they call it, backfill, unquote, their budgets. States will also be responsible for implementing processes such as verifying Medicaid work requirements. And the smoother they make the bureaucracy, the more people will be able to retain the benefits for which they are still eligible. So, the health policy engagements, of course, are a huge part of this issue. Not to mention the, issues with some, major violations of the federal prohibition against making folks eligible who are not here legally. Just to share with you some articles in local newspapers, at least in Southern California News Group, as of July of 2025. This article is entitled "Federal Right to Curtail California's Medicaid Scam." California lawmakers have been expanding Medi-Cal eligibility in recent years. In 2024, they allowed undocumented immigrants ages 26 to 49, the bulk of the undocumented population, but they allowed that group to enroll in Medi-Cal. That made California the first state in the nation to open up its Medicaid program to all undocumented immigrants. That same year, California removed its asset limit test to qualify for Medi-Cal's long-term care benefits. As a result, multi-millionaire seniors can now stay in nursing homes for months or even years without spending a dime of their own money. Now, both of these expansions have proven enormously expensive. Offering Medi-Cal to undocumented immigrants was originally expected to cost $3.9 billion from January 24 through June of 2025. But the state is actually spending about twice that amount, $8.5 billion annually, to fund coverage for roughly 1.6 million undocumented immigrants. It had to borrow billions of dollars from the general fund earlier in the year to cover that tab. So the number of seniors enrolling in Medi-Cal, meanwhile, went up ninefold from roughly 1,600 per month in the final half of 2023 to 14,000 enrollees a month, in the first half of 2024. And that was at a cost of about $700 million to the general fund for fiscal 2024-25 in California. Now, it would be one thing if California taxpayers were paying for this largesse on their own, but the state has managed to stick taxpayers elsewhere with much of the cost of these expansions, not only with the residents of California, but with other states. That's because California employs some of the most aggressive provider taxes in the nation. In 2023, the state more than tripled its tax on insurers who administer Medi-Cal plans from $55 per enrollee per month to $182.50, a figure that has since increased to $187 this year and will jump to $192 in 2026. Now, these taxes aren't just a burden on insurers, though. Just the opposite. California returns this money to insurers via increased Medi-Cal payments. But by raising more revenue and then spending this higher sum on Medi-Cal, California is able to extract additional billions in matching funds from the federal government. The Golden State will receive more than $19 billion in extra federal spending from 2023 through the end of 2026, thanks to this scheme. Nominally, California uses its own money to expand Medi-Cal coverage to people like rich seniors and undocumented immigrants who are ineligible under federal law. Politicians on both parties have previously denounced these levies as legalized money laundering. The OBBA just passed this past July 4th. It halts this racket. The law, the OBBA, freezes existing provider taxes and gradually lowers the harmless safe harbor provider tax threshold from 6% to 3.5%. the previous level of the President Obama's fiscal recommendations. California's the state has frozen enrollment of undocumented immigrants in Medi-Cal, and then they implemented a $30 minimum premium for undocumented enrollees between the ages of 19 and 59. And then they did eliminate dental benefits for undocumented immigrants. The new law also makes sensible reforms, such as requiring states to review their Medicaid rolls every 6 months. That was up from once annually to review those Medicaid rolls and disenroll people who are no longer eligible. That will prevent tens of millions of billions of dollars in improper payments. Then there are the law's new work requirements. Able-bodied individuals up to age 64 who want to stay on Medicaid will need to engage in 80 hours per month of work, volunteer work, education, or job training. Exemptions exist for pregnant women, caregivers, and the disabled. And with that, my last statement, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act doesn't just gut Medi-Cal, it restores its core purpose and reduces the burden on the taxpayer. And it will force California lawmakers to think twice before wantonly expanding coverage in the future. Okay, folks, this is just an incredibly complex subject, but again, it really does hinge on the explosion of medical costs in the industry generally. And of course, legislation does hinge on the Affordable Care Act, special expanded subsidies. That's where why the budget is currently in an impasse. Okay, folks, well, we look forward to your calls and contributions to the program. If so, please call James at evjtax1@gmail.com, and my phone number 951-522-9877. Looking forward to getting together with you next week.
All right, Ev, thank you so much for that information. And guys, I want you to come back tonight at 7 p.m. Right here, Central Standard Time. That's 5 p.m. on the West Coast and 8 p.m. on the East. Got a special tribute to D'Angelo. Many of you realize the young man at the age of 51 passed away. Legendary singer and songwriter, right out of my hometown, right here in Richmond, Virginia. So
and anyway, can I make a comment?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to let everybody know that my only daughter, Suzanne James Donovan from Atlanta, Georgia, sat in on the program of her father this morning.
Oh, wow. Hey, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And tell your friends, all right? Tell your friends, come back each and every week. Absolutely. And 24 hours a day. I want to make another announcement, Ev. Now, those of you who are listening on Facebook, okay. Okay, LinkedIn and YouTube, but
and
YouTube.
Wonderful. I love the ability, to broadcast to those populations.
Well, not only that, through the Apple app, just download Studio W. You're on the Apple app, also on the Android app, which is Studio W, and Alexa and the website. So you're being heard around the world. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brown, and we wish that I was able to share the presence of my daughter with you, but that we can do that in the future.
Oh, we certainly can. All right, let's do it. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You could have said out here, Suzanne.